Too many people in business, I don't care what business, is they start out and say, I want to make a ton of money. But they forget how you get there. And the only way you'll get there is by having the people capability.
The place you come from and how you operate in this world is really cemented in these really young, early years of your life. Do you feel like some of that impacted you in a major way?
Oh, absolutely. You know, people always said, how do you know that so much about this person? Don't know them that well. Well, I'm kind of able to get to that because I had that as my upbringing, and I learned that it was a necessity. I was able to learn how to size up people very quickly. You got to stand for something. I want to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. You know, that's my overall strategy. If you put the people first, then they're going to have the capability to satisfy more customers. You will be on your way to growing whatever you happen to be leading, and then you make money.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot has been a huge supporter of the show since day one, and I chose to partner with HubSpot because they support entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of people that listen to this show are entrepreneurs, and it's hard, and HubSpot creates solutions for entrepreneurs so it's not as difficult. One of the number one problems that all entrepreneurs have is keeping customers happy. It's one thing to acquire customers, keeping them happy, boosting customer satisfaction is a whole other can of worms. It's not easy, but there is an all-new service hub from HubSpot, and it makes it infinitely easier to scale customer support and increase customer retention. Remember, the cheapest customer to acquire is a customer you already have. By bringing service and support together in one powerful platform, you can deliver the best experiences for your customers and your teams. You free up time for your reps, focus on complex issues because HubSpot has an AI-powered help desk. You proactively drive retention with customer health scores that keep your business ahead, stopping churn in its track, and give your entire go-to-market team the data they need to operate as one unified, powerful front. Also, you can easily support, strengthen, and grow your customer base. What's the point of acquiring customers if they all just leave? The secret's out. HubSpot's Service Hub is a game changer. Also, you can better connect with your customers and keep them happy. Visit HubSpot.com/service to do more for your customers today. David, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure, Scott. Looking forward to it.
We're going to have a lot of fun. One of the main things that you always speak about is learning and how important it is for sort of your entire career. And I think that's something that everybody can agree with. But let's start with a different angle on learning. What is one major misconception about learning that people hold?
Well, I think one misperception could be is that if they ask others for help, or if they look like they need to learn something, it means they don't know anything, okay? And it's just the lack of confidence to really reach out and learn from others. And I actually think you show people more confidence by seeking learning from others. But I think the some leaders, they feel like because they're the leader, you know, they gotta know it all, and you know, they really can't go out and seek that know-how or that knowledge. And I think that a lot of times that develops into a fatal flaw, because from what I've learned, Scott, is that, you know, the best leaders in the world have a uncanny combination of confidence and humility. They're very, very confident. They know where they're going. They inspire other people with their vision and the belief that they can get there, but they're also humble enough to let people know that they need them and that they don't know everything. And I think that humility says, I need you, and that's what really inspires people in the end. You know, if I ask you your opinion on something, you know, I'm recognizing you for having worth. And, you know, I think leaders have really got to really understand that learning and being the learner, being the number one learner on your team, being the number one leader, learner in your organization, that will spread, and that's going to get you the best results in the end.
Because this is, I'm assuming, what you applied over your whole career, This is like everything you're teaching is your lens on life. That's it, basically.
Absolutely. I'll be the first to tell you I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I am. I don't know of anybody that is more curious or has a bigger belief in learning and building know-how than me.
Well, I mean, even before we started, you're asking me about how I market my podcast, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, my goodness, look at the businesses that you've built and the brands that you've built, and it doesn't even matter. You know what? Maybe everything I just told you, you already knew. Maybe everything I just told, but the point is, there's always that moment where if you humble yourself, there's like a what if. There's that one gold nugget that you didn't know that could be a huge growth lever in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. You'll never even get there. You'll never uncover it if you're, it's about like getting rid of the ego. This is success.
Well, one of the things I love about what you do is you amplify your podcast. You said you had over 50 pieces of content that'll come from this as you go forward. And, I don't even come close to that with my How Leaders Lead podcast, but, we believe in amplifying. And one of the things that we did recently, which you might be interested in, is we launched a new app called How Leaders Lead. And what we learned was the biggest problem in the leadership development category is people don't have the time. You can give things away free, but they won't take it because they don't have the time to implement it. So, we kind of went to school on like Bible devotionals, where, you could get do a devotional every day. So we have leadership devotional now. So you can go to How Leaders Lead app and get an under 2 minutes clip from the people that I'm interviewing all the time, some of the best leaders in the world. And it is taking off like you can't believe because, it's bite-sized and people get it. And, I'm amplifying the regular podcast that I do on How Leaders Lead.
So it's so interesting. I think that, as you look at younger generations, it's like the shorter, the better, the more attention grabbing, the better. But this is turning, this changes how you have to market a product, a service, a podcast, or whatever. Everything is shorter and like more concise and condensed. I'm curious, you look at the companies and the brands that you've built. What are the lessons that are relevant to marketing your show? What are the lessons that are not relevant when you look at the different kind of product, which is who you are and the thought leadership that you put out into the world? Because it's different than a consumer good.
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody has a brand. Okay. Like you have a brand, Scott. I mean, you stand for something. So one of the lessons is that you got to stand for something. What I want to stand for is I want to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. That's my overall strategy and vision that I have for the David Novak brand. And then what I try to do is reinforce that in everything that I do. Now, I did the exact same thing when I was running KFC, Pizza, and Taco Bell. Okay. We understood what Taco Bell was all about, and then we tried to amplify it and reinforce it in everything that we did. The other thing is that I think that one thing that applies is you have to solve the problems that your customers or your listeners are having. What are the problems out there? I always say that if you can solve the single biggest problem that occurs most frequently, you will be on your way to growing whatever you happen to be leading. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why we started doing shorter content. Okay. Yeah. So that we could solve that problem that it takes about an hour to listen to my podcast, which is great. It's growing and people love it. But, we're giving people another shot at how they can get that content. And, I think that's really going to be very, very powerful. So you got to solve the problems. I think that's very applicable. I don't know of anything that I did in marketing, my brands, that isn't applicable to what I'm doing right now. I just wrote this book, How Leaders Learn. Okay. Yeah. So what did I do there? Now, when I was at Yum Brands, one of the biggest things I wanted to be was a know-how builder. And that was one of our cultural values. We want know-how builders. We want people seeking knowledge wherever they can get it and sharing it whenever they find it. Okay. And, that's a very, very powerful thing. And so when I was going to write this book, How Leaders Learn, one of the things I did is I said, what's the best-selling book in the history of mankind besides the Bible? Well, it's, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah. So I pulled that thing out, read it. It's had short chapters, stories. So basically, I basically copied that approach with how leaders learn. So we have like 27 essays, 27 chapters filled with stories from the best leaders of the world, whether it's Condoleezza Rice or Tom Brady or Tony Hsiu from DoorDash or Anil Bhusri from Workday, Shantanu Narayan from Adobe. We got all these great people, okay? And I put these into chapters that can be read like in 15 minutes. And you can pick a book up another time and read it. It's not this great ordeal that you have to go through, but I learned from what Dale Carnegie did. Now, I don't know how many books I'm going to sell, but I think I'm going to have a heck of a lot better chance of selling a lot more books, which, by the way, goes to the Wendy Novak Diabetes Institute. That's where all the profits go. It's all nonprofit. But, I'm like you. I'm a competitor. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. I want to sell a ton of books. And, so you try to learn and you try to apply it.
So when you're looking for that thing that people need, you're looking for that thing that people want. So you've identified that with the podcast, with the book. You're trying to do some shorter form content, and that's feeding the need of people that don't have a lot of hours in a day to listen to a long form piece. I'm so curious about, because I know the podcast world. I do not know the food world, the hospitality world. I don't know any of that world at all. So I want you to go back and I want you to sort of paint a picture for the reason why Yum Brands and all the subsidiaries were so successful. What was the need that you solve? Because there's a lot of food out there, a lot of options. How does, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, like how do these types of brands stand out? Because I don't know how to identify that need, but I know it's there because I love all the food. So what need are you serving?
Well, I think there's two parts of this. The restaurant business is all about people. I always say, if you put the people first and you build the people capability, then they're going to have the capability to satisfy more customers, and then you make money. Too many people in business, I don't care what business it is, and it's particularly relevant in the retail and restaurant business, is they start out and say, I want to make a ton of money. Okay, but they forget how you get there, and the only way you'll get there is by having the people capability. So the first thing that I did was, and the first thing I would say we did was focus on building a culture where everyone really counts, where we really recognize people for their worth. We got people fired up. We made them feel much better about what they were doing. They felt more involved and more committed. And I think that ultimately leads you to making more of your customers happy and ultimately making more money. If you look at, let's just take Taco Bell, for example. Taco Bell was our most, and still is Yum Brand's most irreverent brand. Okay, it's a fast-growing brand. People love it. It basically owns the category of quick service Mexican food, around a 70% market share. But what we try to do is understand what the customer issues are. And one of the things that we learned, we came out with 3 products, Scott, okay? We put them in a test market. We had a quesadilla, we had a grilled stuffed burrito. These were the first 2. We put them in the test market and said, hey, come to Taco Bell, try the quesadilla. Hey, come to Taco Bell, try the grilled stuffed burrito. No sales growth, none, okay? Then we really tried to understand what's the problem that Taco Bell is having. And Taco Bell's biggest problem was, as we learned, the single biggest problem that occurs most frequently at Taco Bell is the products were too messy to eat. So it's hard to eat a taco when you're in the car. It's like, and you're driving. Now, that's a big problem when 70% of your business is coming out of the drive-thru. Okay? So we took the quesadilla and we took the grilled stuffed burrito and we repositioned them as portable and easy to eat. So we called the quesadilla the hottest new handheld on the market, okay? And we got Jeff Bezos to do the advertising. Now sales are up 12%, okay? We took the grilled stuffed burrito, had people driving through the drive-through, and the cars tilting to the right and up, okay, because the grilled stuffed burrito is so heavy, and we call it the heavy-duty portable, okay? And then we said, this is working so well, because that drove like 9% sales growth. Let's develop a brand new product. We created the Crunch Wrap. the Crunch Wrap was the product of the year when we introduced it, but it was all positioned as good to go. So that's how we applied a lot of our thinking, and then we really understood what the Taco Bell brand was. We knew that it's people going for the most in life.
Yeah.
Young, hip, cool. We did Live Moss was our advertising theme line, and Taco Bell is just knocking it out of the park now. Just knocking it out of the park now, and it's
70% market share is wild, absolutely wild.
Yeah, I mean it's just an amazing brand. Okay, and we try to do the same thing with KFC and Pizza Hut in different ways.
Yeah. No, and I love the process of testing and iterating, and we're going to go into all this. I want to bring it back now that we sort of framed how you think about building and growing brands. You were raised in a trailer park, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to understand, you lived in a trailer park, you moved frequently as a child. What do you think that did for how the effect that had on you as a child? How do you think that impacted how you lead, how you connect with people, how you hire, how you lead with empathy, how you give agency to people, like everything that I feel that the place you come from and how you operate in this world is really cemented in these really young, early years of your life. Do you feel like some of that impacted you in a major way?
Oh, absolutely. One of my chapters in my book, How Leaders Learn, is like learn from your upbringing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, I talk about the fact that, I did grow up in a trailer park. I moved every three months, and my mom would tell me, David, you better go make friends because we're leaving. Okay. And because 3 months later, we would hook up our government truck to the trailer along with the surveying party, and we go to the next small town. And so I was able to learn how to size up people very quickly. I was able to figure out who the good people were, who the people you needed to stay away from, who I wanted to be friends with. And that was something that really helped me in my business. People always said, how do you know that so much about this person? You don't know him that well. Well, I'm kind of able to get to that because I had that as my upbringing, and I learned that it was a necessity. It was really important for me to really try to understand the lay of the land and how people thought and who got along with who and what. And, that really helped me as I was trying to build teams and bring teams together, and that was very influential. The other thing is that my mom and dad were extremely hard workers, okay? And, I learned from them that if you want to get something done, you got to work hard to do it, okay? And, I've always loved what I do, and that's made it easier to work hard. But, I think it was part of my upbringing. So, yes, I mean, absolutely, it was key and fundamental to any success that I've ever had.
It's so interesting how you say, like, you've always loved what you do, but I don't think many people, when they're growing up, they're saying, I want to be a CEO of all these different restaurant brands. So when you say you've always loved what you do, maybe go deeper on that. How did you learn to love what you do?
Well, I actually think that's so important. I write a chapter on really pursuing your joy. Learn to pursue your joy because, when I was in college, my first 2 years of college were very mediocre. I mean, I had a lot more fun partying than I did studying. I was not a good student. I wasn't really proud of myself on that front, okay? But then I took an advertising class in journalism school, and I fell in love with advertising. Absolutely fell in love with it. So now instead of being a 2.5 GPA, I end up getting a 4.0. And I end up, being the advertising man of the year at the University of Missouri, which is a hell of a good journalism school, okay? Now, why was that? Because now all I wanted to do was learn. Back to learning again. All I want to do is learn about advertising, how it works, what's the best way to get good at it, and that was the key. So when I started out in business, I had a big advantage because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in advertising. So I go into advertising. I actually start out as an advertising copywriter. And I loved thinking about how I was going to write this ad. You know, there's nothing more sobering, Scott, to look at a blank sheet of paper and know that you got to come up with the idea and go sell it. You got a marketing background. You know what I'm talking about, okay? Well, you know, that really taught me how to learn how to be creative. And when you're in an advertising agency, you learn how to work with creative people as well. That really paid off for me, but I loved it. But then I realized that, you know what? I don't think I necessarily want to be a copywriter. I want to get into the business side of advertising. And so I changed jobs, got into account management, worked my way up in account management, loved learning all the time about, you know, how to make customers happy and how to advertise to them. And, you know, that was fantastic because I loved it. I mean, and when you love something, you kind of run to work. You know, it's not like, you know, a hard thing to do. And then, you know, I kind of got into this situation in the advertising business where I kind of felt like it just wasn't for me because, you know, in the agency business, they have this thing called an agency point of view. You got to come to your client with an agency point of view. Well, sometimes I didn't necessarily agree with what the agency point of view was. And even though I was up at the top of running the account and everything, the creative people would want to do something and I wouldn't necessarily agree with it. And I'd go to Frito-Lay and try to, you know, show them an idea. And they'd look at me afterwards and say, how in the world could you bring this advertising idea to me? And I would say, yeah, you're probably right, because I didn't like it either. Okay. And so I wanted to control my destiny. And that's when I moved to the client side, became the chief marketing officer at Pizza Hut. And now I'm back into the game where I'm loving it all of a sudden because I have control of my destiny. I'm accountable. I'm not yet. And then I was able to take all of my know-how on how to work with creative people. Mm-hmm. And that helped me get great advertising campaigns at Pizza Hut. That's why I got promoted to go to Pepsi and run marketing and sales for Pepsi. But I was just always doing what I loved. And then, you know, I happened to get into food service, and I loved KFC. And turned around KFC in a few years as the president of KFC. And Roger Enrico comes to me and says, David, I want you to go be the CEO of Frito-Lay. And I say, no, Roger, I don't really want to do that because you know why? I love the restaurant business. I love people. I love food. I love marketing. This is my business. So I turned down a much bigger division to go be president of, okay?
Yeah.
To stay at KFC. And then they gave me Pizza Hut to run. And I didn't know it at the time. PepsiCo was planning to spin off the restaurant business. So now I'm running two brands. I'm in perfect position to become the head of that company. But it was all because I followed what I loved. It was like, you know, and then, you know, as I was running Young Brands, you know, I focused on the things that I was best at, you know, building culture, working with people, you know, marketing and food. You know, I really love food. I love to create products and get in the lab with our people and work on it, you know. And so, man, I was a really happy person.
You know, you did something that I think is so smart. Obviously, you're following what you care about. So you put 100%, 110% of yourself into it. I want to just take a look at how people look at careers now in 2024, because I feel like people want to pursue what they love to the point where they leave companies quite quickly, which I think is not a thing that was happening as prevalently as when you were sort of on the come up and you were growing. Now people are putting in 2 years. So how do you, what is your advice for somebody who is in their career trying to grow and they want to maximize a potential opportunity? How long do you give it to know if you should stay there or if you should go? Because right now people are jumping ship very quickly. And I think that if you were 20 in 2024, you may have not had the success if you jumped to different opportunities as quickly and not given the time where it's due with all the different brands you worked with.
I think if you're going to be a jumper, okay, you know, you're heading towards entrepreneur land.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you pick up a lot of experience, then you get to the point where you figure out that, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I've learned enough. Now I'm going to go do it. And that's how you're going to really, really be successful. Okay. If you want to be a successful jumper. Okay. You know, but I think if you really want to move up, you got to build a track record. You got to build results everywhere. Okay. I always believe this. You should stay in a place as long as you're growing, as long as you feel valued, and as long as you have somebody investing in you and helping you learn. Okay. The minute you don't feel like you're growing, the minute you're working for a jerk that you know is not going to go away in a hurry. Okay. That's when you need to start thinking about, hey, it's time for me to go somewhere else. Okay. But if you can grow in the same place, if you're going to be in the corporate world, the best track record you get, okay, that's going to help you move up not only in that company, but then maybe make the big quantum move to another company down the road. But I think you need to put some wins on the board if you really want to go the traditional route of moving up in companies. So growth, I think, is the key. It comes back to, am I learning? Back to that same thing we were talking about here. Am I learning or not? If I'm not learning, man, I'm dying. Okay, so you gotta get going. I did a podcast yesterday with Steve Squeri from American Express. Steve grew up in American Express 40 years. Okay, 40 years.
Wild.
Became the CEO. That's a hell of a story. He's been CEO now for 7 years. Okay, but that's a hell of a story. And what I asked him, why'd you stay? He said, well, I was always able to keep learning and keep growing. And, I took on jobs that maybe other people wouldn't want to take. So learn, that's another thing I write about. Learn from doing the hard stuff. He managed, I don't know if you remember this, but Y2K, okay?
Yeah, I remember it. I'm not that young.
Year 2000, you look so much younger than me. I'm maybe that's because I got to put the T-shirt on. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, but he took on the Y2K project. Now I remember Y2K. That was like, the world was going to end. You had to get all your technology ready and all this. He took that on and he got to present to the board. He got all this visibility because, he was doing the hard stuff and he was learning. But American Express always put him in a learning position. So I think you got to know. You'll know if you're stale and you just keep thinking you're just going through the same old. You got to get off your ass and go get a better job.
Yeah. And you've spoken about so not just getting off your ass, getting a better job. If you're not learning, you're not growing, but also you have to deal with your own imposter syndrome about what you're able to do. And I think you've done that repeatedly as well. I think that's something that you talk about, imposter syndrome, a lot with entrepreneurs. I don't think you really speak about it. Not you. I don't think that it's not communicated as well to people in jobs. I think that it's good to push and to go for stretch goals and to do the extra work. And it's interesting because there's also a culture of just do what you're paid to do. But my career success has always been based on doing more than what I've been paid to do. And it's worked out quite well.
Yeah, it's worked out really well for you. But, the people who just, do what they're supposed to do, they're heading towards mediocrity. They're not going to get all the cookies in the cookie jar someday. Okay, they're going to wake up someday and go, why not me? Well,
yeah.
And, by the way, I talk to a lot of young people, and there are a lot of people out there that want to just grow and get things done. And, they don't want to just, do what's expected. I think there are a lot of people that are really trying to make things happen, and that's what makes our country great, and that's what I think will make them ultimately great. But that's why you did what you did, Scott. I mean, you built technology companies. Now you're doing this. You're pursuing your joy. You love what you're doing. You're spreading your knowledge. All that stuff makes you happy. Other directed people are the happiest people in the world. Okay. And I'm sure that's what gives me joy. I'm sure that's what gives you joy.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does. I mean, this is why we do this, right? So let's talk about learning a little bit. We've sort of woven in learning into a couple different things we've spoken about, but your book is How Leaders Learn. So you took a whole bunch of lessons from your career, from people that you've spoken to, and you've spoken to some incredible people. But you recognize sort of three different things or three different types of behavior required to learn. So let's talk about those. do you want me? I can go through them right now. So I mean, and then you can sort of because you have so you can, if you're going to try to learn properly, you have to learn from anybody and any experience that has something new or interesting and valuable to teach you. You have to learn to maintain an open, curious mind. So curiosity, the forever student, very important. And then learn by doing things that need the doing or that will make the biggest difference. So sort of 3 attributes of learning that are important. So let's go maybe expand on lessons that you've experienced personally, or some of the awesome people that you've interviewed. Go by one by one. So learning from anybody. Give me like a practical example or a way that has impacted your career in a major way.
Well, the first thing, a great one on that is a chapter on, learn from people who know what you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When I came up in PepsiCo, I was the marketing person. And so I went to Wayne Calloway, who was the chairman of PepsiCo, and I'd always have meetings with him every quarter. And finally he asked me, what do you want to do in your career? And I said, well, I'd like to be a president of division. He said, well, you know what, David, you're a really good marketing person. And I said, well, I'd really like to be a president of division. He says, you're a really good marketing person. I said, no, I want to run something. Oh, you're a really good marketing person. Well, I walked out of there and I knew that I was going to have to demonstrate that I was more than a good marketing person. So, the chief operating officer job came up at Pepsi-Cola Company. So I go to my boss at that time, Craig Weather, beg him for the opportunity, tell him he can fire me in 6 months if I do a bad job, but give me the opportunity to demonstrate that I'm more than a marketing person, okay? Now, when I got that job, Scott, I didn't know anything about bottling. I'd been into a bottling plant, but I'd gone in sort of as the marketing person where I'm walking around and I'm thinking about what creative ideas I got to get done, while I'm in this bottling plant. I wasn't really paying it any attention, so I didn't know anything. So what I did is I went to the people who did. I found out who the top operating people were at Pepsi-Cola Company, brought them in, asked them what's working, what's not working, what they would do if they were me. And, then I used my power to get after that. Then I also went out into the bottling plants and met with the front line. These people know the business better than anybody else. I would buy them coffee in the morning and we'd sit down and we'd talk for a couple hours about what was working, what's not working. And these people knew what I didn't. And then I applied it. Now, so one of the things I talk about, I used to think that being an avid learner was the key thing that really drove success. You know what? If you're an avid learner, you can learn stuff for learning's sake. The real thing is, can you turn the corner and pair that learning with execution? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's when you become an active learner. And that's what I write about in the book. How do you become an active learner where you actually take the learning and pair it with execution? And that's exactly what I did when I was the chief operating officer. I learned all this stuff. Then I used all the power I had to come back and put the processes and discipline in place and get people working on the things that I knew were the biggest problems. But I couldn't have solved all those problems. I couldn't have done it. I didn't know anything about operations. But man, I got a lot of really good results in a real hurry because I learned from people who don't, who learned from people who did know a lot more than me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that also, like, there is a little bit of a culture of accumulating knowledge. I think people like to listen to podcasts and they like to read books and they like to do all that stuff. But I mean, you got to apply. That's what differentiates.
Scott, how many times have you seen people? It used to drive me nuts. Okay, you go to a 3-day seminar. You say, "Oh, that was really terrific." You come back, nothing changes.
Every time.
So, it happens so much. So, like, I taught a leadership program at Yum Brands, and one of the things I talk about is learn to teach.
Yeah.
Because if you teach, then you'll you'll know it even better, and you'll share. You're not hoarding your knowledge. You're building the capability of your people. But I did a 3-day program called Taking People With You, which I wrote a book called Taking People With You: The Only Way to Make Big Things Happen, and to make sure that people didn't just come in and learn about my approach and then just go back and do the same thing. I had 30-day follow-up, 90-day follow-ups, and 6-month follow-ups where they had to show what they were doing with the single biggest thing that could have the biggest impact in our company, which is they had to come in with that project when they came to the program. Then I followed up and they had to demonstrate to me that they were putting the learning and putting it into use.
Okay, so they're actually like you're doing like a specific call to action after a seminar.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people go to these seminars and they go back and I pick up something, but if I'm going to spend 3 days teaching people everything I know about how to take people with them to get the single biggest thing that they're working on done, okay, then I got to put some sort of mechanism in place that drives execution.
Yeah.
And another good example of this, for me personally, when I became the head of Yum Brands, I was a marketing operations background now, didn't know how to work with the investment community, okay? So I found a way to get into Warren Buffett's office in 1998 and asked him how to work with the investment community. He said, David, you got to tell them you're in a tough business. You're going to win more than you lose, but you're going to be doing the right thing. And tell them what the problems are that you have. That'll give you credibility. Now, I'm a salesperson. I was like, oh, man, we're the greatest company.
No problems at all.
But then what I started doing, I said, now, if you buy our stock, you need to realize that we potentially could have this happen or that happen or whatever. And then investors would start arguing with me and say, that's not really going to happen. That's fine. But I was sober selling. I learned to sober sell from Warren Buffett. And it was something that I thought was very, very powerful. But I put it into use immediately when I started going out to Wall Street and talking to investors.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, HubSpot has an incredible podcast network, the HubSpot Podcast Network. My show, Success Story, is part of it. But if you love great podcasts, you have to listen to Imperfect Action, hosted by Steph Taylor. She cuts to the chase. She dishes out actionable strategies on online marketing, content creation, social media, and more. Steph is your marketing-obsessed friend. She's been in the trenches for years. She shares what works and what doesn't, so you skip that costly trial and error. If you crave friendly, educational content that gets results, Imperfect Action is your new favorite podcast. Check out Imperfect Action wherever you get your podcasts. What percentage of a CEO or leader, chairman, whatever's job is market making? I didn't even think about that. You had to do that regularly as well?
Yeah, I think it's the one thing that the CEO has to do, okay? Yeah. Because, you've got other people doing other things. I had presidents of Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC, and, but when it comes to growing the stock and telling the story and getting people excited about what our future was, internally and externally, I viewed that to be my job. So, you gotta watch what you say, though. Because, yeah, you do. You have to be a sober salesperson. You gotta not get carried away. You gotta do what you say.
Yeah.
But the reason why our company did so well, Scott, is we had 13% earnings per share growth for 13 straight years in a row.
Yeah.
Okay. That gives you a little bit of credibility over time, and that wasn't me. That was just the organization and everything that we were doing together.
Yeah, of course. Second thing, curiosity. So being a student all the time, I think, is super important. You were showing me this, like when you list off the things that you talk about in the book, sometimes you're like, okay, it sounds nice, but does this guy actually do this stuff in real life? And then 5 minutes for the podcast, again, you're asking me everything that I've done about the podcast. So I know that you live this every single day. So let's talk about some other examples, maybe somebody that you spoke to on your show, or even yourself. I mean, you said you're always a student, you're always learning. How do you leverage that for your career, for your business, for whatever it is you're building?
Well, one of the things, moving on to the second thing, you learn from things like your upbringing, new environments, being a truth teller, crises. I write about all these kind of things that you can learn from. You also can learn to, ask better questions, check on your own judgment, see the world the way it really is, not the way you necessarily want it to be.
Yeah.
But one of the things I talk about is you need to learn to be a pattern thinker. One way that I did it, and I'll give you an example of how somebody else did it, okay, was when I was on the Frito-Lay account, they needed a new product idea. So I said to my team, I said, look, let's go to the grocery store and let's just walk around, see what's growing. So we get to the salad dressing aisle, okay? And this was for Doritos. We get to the salad dressing aisle and we realize that ranch flavored dressing had the most facings and was the fastest growing new salad dressing. Okay? So I come back and I call Dennis Hurt, who was the head of R&D at Frito-Lay, and say, hey, look, this ranch flavor is really, really growing. Do you think we could do a ranch flavored Dorito? He goes, yeah, I think we could. So we ended up doing Cool Ranch Doritos. Yeah. Huge success. But it was patterned.
Delicious.
I looked at what was going on in the salad dressing category and said, how can we do it in the snack business? Okay. And then, I talked to Roger Goodell on one of my podcasts. Okay. He visits technology companies every year. He goes out and goes to Google and Apple and, Microsoft and then he comes back and figures out, what they could do. Now, years ago, he made sure that the stadiums all had Wi-Fi and, so, but he put it into action. And so he looks at what's happening in another part of the world and says, how can I apply it in my business? Okay. And I think if you can learn to be a pattern thinker, all of a sudden you open up all kinds of ideas. That's why I always love reading the Wall Street Journal, marketing magazines, everything. And I go, well, if they're doing this at Dick's Sporting Goods, how could I do that at Taco Bell? Yeah, it's going to be different. It is not going to be the same, but it's going to give you ideas that you otherwise wouldn't have. And if you can find success and learn from it, and then say, how can I apply it to my business? Man, you're opening up all kinds of avenues for growth.
I think that's a massively undervalued idea that you just gave, because what people, I think they do, because I've done this and I'm probably like the majority of people. Maybe I'm not as strong a pattern thinker. And if I want to start a business, I'll look at the competitors and I'll try and do something that's cheaper or slightly better than everyone in the market. But then you're just emulating the same idea. You're not doing anything new.
Yeah. But what you want to do is take the thinking that's out there and then think about how you can do something really new.
Yeah.
And you look at Cool Ranch Doritos right now and you go, oh, well, that's a no-brainer, but you know what? Back then it wasn't a no-brainer, okay? Because it hadn't been done.
Well, I bet they didn't have all the ranch. Now ranch is everywhere. Like now it makes a ton of sense, right? Because if one works, then everyone else is going to copy you. But
everybody's got a ranch flavored potato chip, a ranch everything. Yeah. Everybody copied us, okay?
Yeah.
But we were first in, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love it. And the last sort of learning attribute is you learn by doing the things that are going to make the biggest difference. So first of all, I think the question that comes with that is, how do you figure out what's going to move the needle the most on that urgent, important, on that Eisenhower matrix, whatever, because it's sometimes I think people do a lot of the work that maybe is the busy work, but not the most urgent, important work. So how do you identify that? And then how does it help you learn?
Well, I think you got to really understand what really drives your business. Okay. I write about my time with Tony Hsu from DoorDash. Okay. This guy delivered hummus. Okay. He knows the delivery process better than anybody in the business. And so he learns by doing the hard things, because he knows in his business it's all about execution. How does DoorDash, deliver what it needs to deliver on time and with excellence? So this guy, he goes out every month now and he actually does delivery. Okay. And he has people do delivery. He does the hard stuff. So that's not that sexy, but that's how you really drive that business. It's just real hardcore execution. I talked to Uri Levine, okay, who created Waze, okay, mm-hmm. And he learned that the biggest problem that he learned by really understanding the problems that his customers are having, and they get stuck in traffic. So how do they get out of traffic? And he solved that problem, built a hell of a business, okay, because he learned by, understanding his customers and understanding what the big problems are. And he wrote a great book called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, which I love. The guy's a brilliant guy. You learn by preparing, okay? Brian Roberts, who runs Comcast, this guy is a serial learner, okay? And one of the things that he does, he talks about hanging around the rim, okay? Just getting out there, talking to people, finding out what's going on, hanging around the rim. And sooner or later, that ball's going to bounce your way, okay? But he's preparing to take action. He's preparing to get the rebound and do the slam dunk, okay? I don't know what it's going to be, but if you look at his track record, he bought Universal Studios, he bought AT&T, broadband. I mean, this guy, he knows how to play around the rim and then execute when he gets the chance. Learning by another one that I love on learning by is learn by recognizing on purpose. This is really powerful for everybody out there. Recognition is so needed in the workplace today. But if you're going to recognize somebody and you're going to recognize people on your team, recognize on purpose. What are the things that are going to drive performance on your team? Is it meeting deadlines? Is it coming up with breakthrough ideas? Is it collaboration? I don't know what those things are, but find out what those things are that are going to drive performance on your team and then recognize the heck out of them, because that's what people will do. People will do what they see getting recognized, and you'll get more and more of it. And that's how you really build a powerful culture with your team or with your business or whatever your work unit might be.
Do you think companies miss the mark? Because I love that, recognize on purpose. So do you think companies miss the mark on this? They're recognizing things that are actually not moving the needle? Are they recognizing non-behaviors? Is this sort of like, there's the Alexa. No, you're good. Is it something along the lines of you're focusing on like hours and seats versus like the output or the revenue or the whatever leading indicator you want to manage?
Yeah, that happens all the time. It's what I talked about earlier. People focus on the profits, but they don't think about how you get there.
Yeah.
When you recognize on purpose, you think about the behaviors that will drive the performance that will ultimately get you the profits. And a lot of times people are so bottom line oriented that they don't really take the time to think about, okay, I'm going to have much more collaboration to get this done. Well, I'm going to have a lot bigger ideas to get this done. And then, how do you recognize those things so that it enables it and facilitates it in your organization?
Do you feel like that's a problem that starts to manifest in a company after a certain size, like post IPO, when you have shareholders to answer to? Because I think that to get off the ground, a startup has to focus on the things that move the needle. But then there's this mysterious point. What's the size of the company when for some reason you focus on all these other metrics that are actually not moving the needle? Because you've worked in like the range of companies. You've worked in the largest companies that exist on planet Earth, really. So I'm curious when companies lose themselves.
I think companies lose themselves when they lose sight of who they're serving, when they lose sight of their customers, and they get so internally driven and so full of themselves that they stop listening and responding to their customers. And that also happens with their people, because there's an arrogance of it. We do it this way. That's usually when you derail. I've gone in and I've turned around businesses with teams before, and it's always almost a back to the basics program. It's just people lose sight of the basics, and you have to figure out what those basics are in every business, put process and discipline around them, and I can guarantee you more times than not that'll be the key to turning around a business. I'm reading this book right now on Elon Musk, which is, I'm really enjoying this. He's not the kind of leader that I would necessarily want to work for, or he's not the kind of leader that has my style, but you know what? He has his own style. But the one thing that he always keeps front and center is, what's his mission? It's like, I'm going to make the world a better place and by the things that I do. And then he thinks so boldly and so incredible about those things, okay, that he doesn't, that his mission drives him, okay? And, but his mission is very external, okay? It's not, oh, we're going to be the largest electrical car company, Yeah, no, we're gonna make the planet, green. And this guy's thinking huge. And but he's got a noble cause to what he does, and he stays true to it. I think that's a really important thing for every company, is to have something that's bigger than just making a buck.
For Yum, was that because you mentioned a few times how culture was one of the most important drivers of success at Yum, and I think that's culture is a big word, and it encompasses quite a bit. But I mean, if I look at your tenure, you grew Yum from 4 billion to 32 billion. So you did something right. Just a couple things, right? Just a few things right.
Well,
so
when a great team.
Exactly. So when you have numbers like that, what's the thing outside of money that enabled you to do that? Because there's another goal there. There's another thing that you unlocked in the people that work for you.
The minute I became the CEO, I said we were going to create the Yum dynasty. We were going to get consistent performance year after year after year, okay? And I went out and I learned from the top performing companies at the time what they did. And they were 5 dynasty drivers. And that's what I built the whole company around. One, creating a culture where everyone counts, competitive brand differentiation, process in both people and work processes, a beat year ago mentality, competitive differentiation in everything you do. These were the 5 things that all the great companies did when I talked to them. And the number one thing they did that they talked about more than anything else was creating a culture where everyone counts. So that I made that my number one thing that I focused on as a CEO, is to really create that culture, because I think that was the real driver. But then, Scott, we became very successful, and we became even bigger. We were getting that dynasty-like performance year after year. We were nailing it. So then I said, we're going to be the defining global company that feeds the world. That was huge. I said,
that is huge.
We want people coming to visit us, okay, to see how we did it. And how are we going to do it? Create a recognition culture where a renowned recognition culture where everyone counts. Build vibrant, dynamic brands everywhere we do business, and then help people who can't afford our food get fed. And so our corporate social responsibility effort was with the World Food Program, okay? And, it just motivated the hell out of our people. But you want to be a part of something big. Nobody wakes up, Scott, nobody wakes up every day wanting to be a part of something mediocre. People wake up, want to be a part of something great. And I think one of the things that, you got all these leaders that are listening to this, get your team excited about doing something great, not just doing the job or the task. How do you do it in a way that's going to change your business or change the world or whatever? But recognize that people do not want to come to work and be a part of something mediocre. And then you get everybody involved in doing what they can do in their piece of the company so that you can have ultimate success. And so everyone knows that their job counts, whether they're a janitor or an administrative assistant or a senior VP. Everybody needs to know that their job counts.
Is there one thing or one major thing you can point to? Because if you can get people on board with a mission like that, you're going to unlock this energy that you're not going to get if you're, again, a mediocre company. But how do you get everybody on board with a mission like that big?
Look, we had 1.5 million people. Okay,
I know you did,
and
that's a lot of people.
And not everybody was on board. Not everybody, we didn't reach everybody like we really wanted to. We had franchise groups we had to try to convince to do things. It was not easy. Okay, it was not. So I don't want to give you this, paint this picture where everything was wonderful. We had our challenges, but what you do is you communicate. You talk about it all the time. You highlight the process. So you highlight the things that you see as a leader. I actually did, when I went around the world, it was sort of like, where's Waldo? Where's David? I would be posting, blogs on what I was seeing in India, what I was seeing in China that was helping us, build vibrant brands, what I was seeing, in Malaysia in terms of how people were recognizing each other. And you know what? People know what you stand for. And, the people who are going to build your company, they'll try to emulate the things that you want to have done.
And you can't let yourself fall into like a bubble when you're a CEO. Like you can't just sit at the top of the ivory tower. I think that part of what you do so well is you seem to just be very human and very open with everything you're taking on. And
I think,
really good.
Everybody talks about being vulnerable now. That's the big buzzword everybody's writing books about and all that stuff. I think what you got to be is you got to learn to be yourself. Okay. And, and you know what, Scott, you got your DNA. I got my DNA. There's no way you can be anybody but you. And there's no way I can be anybody but me. And the sooner you realize that in your life, the better off you're going to be. And the more people will really follow you. Okay.
Yeah.
And, I think that's really key. And I think it's so important to learn to be reflective. It's to learn to take the time to reflect on who you are, how you're doing, what you need to do to grow. Mm-hmm. I think that reflection is critical. And, all of us seem to get a lot of times into this, little treadmill, just, and you got to get off of it every now and then just to take stock of who you are and how you're doing and what you need to do to impact your business and the people you lead in as powerful way as you can.
Do you feel like, in your own career, I'm sure when you were coming up, you had like a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I'm sure you put on a face to, act a certain way or be a certain way. But is there a point that you can think of in your career when you like settled into yourself? Was that the point when career took off? I'm just curious how you sort of came to that.
Great point. Hey, when I was coming up, I was always the youngest person on the team. Yeah. And I didn't have an MBA. So when people started talking about their MBAs, I went to the bathroom. When people started talking about how old they were, I went to the bathroom. Okay. So I was, Tom Brady told me once, you need to fake it until you can make it, and I was building my work capability the whole time. Okay. I think you can't underestimate the power of time and grade, just experience. Okay. And building the capability. For example, one of the things that I do now is I do motivational speaking and I get to do all these speaking engagements, mm-hmm. what I can. But let me tell you something, Scott, when I was coming up in business and I had a presentation to make, I was so afraid you cannot believe it. I said, 1,000 times. I cracked a stupid joke that nobody laughed at just to kind of break the tension that I had. I was not a good communicator. But then I wanted to learn from the best communications teacher. Okay, so I went to this guy named Mac Linden in New York, spent a day with him, saw myself on videotape, learned how to be a better speaker, learned that you could be big on stage, use your arms, do all this stuff, and so then I go from that meeting and I go to this Pepsi convention where we have 7,000 or 8,000 people in the Dallas Convention Center. Okay. And I got to give this speech. Well, at that point, we just launched this campaign. You got the right one, baby. And it had taken off and it was a very popular campaign. So I started my speech and somebody out in the crowd yelled, okay. And from that moment, it took off and I say something and they'd yell, and then I'd say something, they'd go, and it was like a Baptist revival. It was like unbelievable. I had everybody going, and it was an amazing thing, okay, that happened. From that point on, I never, ever feared public speaking again because I had such a big win that it gave me confidence. And then when I became the head of KFC and Pizza Hut and Yum. You always got to give the last speech.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get up there. I just convinced myself that they needed me, whether they did or not. Okay. But it was like, I couldn't wait to get up on that stage. Now, if you'd have told me I would have had that same feeling when I was 28 years old, I don't think I would have believed you. So I don't think I really had a breakthrough on that area of my career until I was probably 40 years old.
You know what you did though? You created the opportunities that allowed you to have that breakthrough.
I worked, I did whatever I could. I tried my best, but the best thing that I had was, I think, going back to my upbringing, I learned how to work with people. I learned how to value people. My mom and dad were, just salt of the earth people, didn't have college education. All they wanted for me was, to achieve the American dream. Okay. They never had any clue, and I didn't have any clue that I would end up where I've ended up. But one of the things that I always saw when I went out and I went into Pizza Huts and Taco Bells and KFCs, and I always talked to the people, the front line, I saw my mom and dad. And I thought, they've got so much to offer. My mom and dad are at least as smart as me, okay? Probably smarter. And the only thing they didn't have is a college education, didn't have all the people that mentored them and coached them like I had, okay? And, and I also had a wife who, would kind of kick my butt when it was time for me to make a move, and when she would see me wrestling a little bit, and I think that really, really helped me a hell of a lot.
Yeah. I think that, like when you surround yourself with those people, that's really the differentiator, because you get in your own head all the time too. Yeah. Like you said, you get in your,
you got to have truth tellers around you.
Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned to you before we got on that my wife passed, okay, just a couple weeks ago. And, I'm trying to get back in the saddle by doing things like this, but I was blessed enough in 2012 to be the CEO of the year. Okay. And so we go up the New York Stock Exchange after we ring the bell. And I got to do that twice. I got to do it in 1997 when we became a public company. And then as CEO of the year, you got to ring the bell. So we go up the top floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and they got all these pictures of all these CEOs that got CEO of the year. They had Larry Bossidy, Andy Grove from Intel, Herb Keller from Southwest Airlines. And my wife said to me, she said, "David, what in the heck are you doing in here?" and you need that. You need people to keep you grounded, and we all need that.
Yeah. I have a question for you. You started this podcast. I just wanted to look behind you. You have a framed interview with someone behind you on your desk. Who's that interview that you did?
Oh, that's with Tom Brady.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm really blessed to have him as a good friend, and he actually endorsed my book, How Leaders Learn. And but speaking of that, Scott, he's probably the best leader I've ever talked to. Okay, because he knows his trade incredible. When he starts talking about football, it's amazing. He knows how to inspire people. He's a great communicator. And he's got all the physical skills you need to have to perform. And he's an active learner. Like he'd go to Tom House to learn how to throw the football more efficiently and more effectively. If he just went there and didn't come back and use it, it wouldn't have helped him. But he goes to Tom House, is the best in the world at that. He improves his footwork, his percentage pass completions goes up. But this guy's constantly getting better at everything that he does.
Yeah. Well, it's the mindset. It's a mindset of constant learner. That's what he's doing. That's what he applies, right? He's living it. He's living it. What's, we went through a whole bunch of lessons today. What would be one major lesson that we didn't go into that you think was powerful that you learned yourself or from someone else?
Well, let me think about that for a second. Everybody talks about learning from failures, but one example of that, which I really loved, came from a story in a podcast I did with Scott Hamilton. Remember the great ice skater? And he said he had to fall 4,000 or 5,000 times. Okay. But he said, look at failure as information. Just look, it's not like you fail. It's that you're gaining information that's going to help you get better each and every day. And I love that. Just think if you looked at failure, and when you fail, is information that you can put into your catalog, okay, and use it as you go forward. I love that. And then I think you can also learn from winning.
Yeah.
Dr. John Noseworthy from Mayo Clinic, he took over a company that needed to be reshaped, but he went back and looked at how they won when it had to be reshaped before he had that job. And it was basically, hey, look, we've done it once, we can do it again. So I think you can learn from, everybody talks about failures and learning from your failures, which I love. And I love how, Scott Hamilton basically did that. But I think you can win a lot I think you can learn a lot just from how people win, how you've won, and cataloging that and not forgetting it.
I love that. And I think that this is so powerful because I think that, especially in our own lives, we gloss over the wins. We don't remember all the cool stuff we did and how many times we succeeded. And you focus on the failures because they hurt. The wins don't hurt.
It's like these golfers that go out, they hit a bad shot, and it's, oh my God, I'm terrible, but what about that 15 good ones that you hit?
Yeah.
Why isn't that in your memory box?
Yeah.
And I would tell everybody that they need to start building their own personal highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you got a big challenge, you can look back and say, you know what? I did this, I did that. I can do this now, and I can do that. Build that highlight reel. I think that'll really help you.
I love that. Where can people connect with you? Get any of your books? Listen to your podcast.
Go to howleaderslead.com and you can figure out, what's happening in my world. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on X, David Novak Ogo. It's I would just tell you that I'm very thrilled, Scott, that you had me on this podcast. And, my mission, like yours, is just to try to help people. And I really think that my book can be purchased on Amazon, anywhere you buy your books. But, I think I've kind of poured my heart and soul into this one. And it's not just my stories, but it's stories from the world's most successful people. And that's why I think it's a great book, because it's got, it's backed by a lot of people and a lot of research in each one of these areas, which we try to get at. They say about a third of readers won't believe you unless there's some sort of research that backs it up. Well, we cite research that backs up all the learnings that we do.
Yeah, because you mentioned Condoleezza Rice, Tom Brady. You have Dr. John Noseworthy. You have Eric Church, which I love his music. Jamie Dimon. You have a lot. You have a lot of really great people in this book. This is because this is the type of content I love. Right? You take all the lessons from all the most incredible people, and you're teaching them over to the world. We have very similar missions, basically, is all I'm saying. But okay, so we'll put that all in the show notes. People can check out the book, check out the podcast, connect with you. If you were going, just quick questions to wrap up, pull out 2 more lessons from you. If you were going to tell your 20-year-old self one thing after all the success that you've had, what would that thing be?
You never know what you're capable of. You might be starting out at the very bottom, but if you do that job as well as you can do it, and see what the next job is and figure out what you need to do to get that next job and keep doing that throughout your career, you'll be surprised where you end up.
And when you look at your career and your life now, what does success mean to you?
Success means helping other people become all that they can be. I've been so blessed. I've had the privilege of leadership. Now I want to give back. And, I read some research that other directed people are the happiest people in the world. Okay. And I'm finding by wanting to give back, by writing a book like How Leaders Learn, doing my podcast, I've never been happier with my business life. I hope I can just get better and better at doing it.